Hey, all right. Happy Friday, everybody. It's 12 o'clock for our weekly Facebook Live event. Dr. Patulka has been doing a great job on some of his videos lately, so I hope you've had a chance to catch those. If not, obviously, we've saved them all, and they're kind of easy to find on our YouTube page or, on our Facebook page. We got a new website coming out here soon. It's going to be really exciting, so stay tuned for that. We'll be sending out some posts and some emails on that. All right, I'm Dr. Chris Kopp, physical therapist with Premier Physical Therapy. 2 locations. If you're in Jacksonville, we have one on Beach Boulevard between Hodges and San Pablo, and I'm down here at our Ponte Vedra Beach office, where we do a lot of our golf-specific and sports medicine type work, but obviously we do traditional physical therapy things as well. This week's topic is return to sport or injury prevention. So obviously, as physical therapists and in the rehab world of things and private practice, outpatient orthopedics, we have a lot of people who are hurt or have had surgery and have been out of their activity or sport for a while, and now they're trying to figure out how to come back to that safely, sometimes on their own and sometimes through our direction and guidance. When you come to see us as a physical therapy patient, particularly to our clinic, we do look at you as a part of the phase of rehabilitation. And usually we have 4 phases of rehabilitation, depending on where you are on your status of function and or injury or pain. So obviously phase 1 would be the beginning. That's like if you're immediately right after surgery or immediately right after injury, or you're really suffering from some pain and some symptoms, and you really are limited in a lot of mostly this day-to-day stuff. Could be your sport. Well, we evaluate you and we come up with a tissue-specific diagnosis. We figure out where the state of that injured tissue is, or what is the source of your pain, so to speak, that's preventing you from doing the things you want to do. We come up with strategies for that, usually some sort of manual therapy and some adjunct type treatments, and then usually a properly dosed exercise regimen to promote some healing, get rid of some swelling, reduce your symptoms, what have you. And then as you feel better, we move you into a phase 2 rehab. Get rid of some of the earlier exercises, start advancing those. We look at a strength curve where we take repetitions to fatigue of maybe 20 to 25, maybe 30. And now we're starting to maybe build up some endurance. Maybe it's a little bit of coordination, getting some body control, looking at other areas of your body that may have contributed to the injury to begin with, or that are maybe interfering with it to get better. So if it's your low back, we might be looking at your hips, your knees, your ankles. If it's your neck, we might be looking at your posture. If it's your shoulder, we might be looking at your posture, what have you. And then phase 3 is really a full range of motion, no pain. Full available range of motion means like you had a back injury now, like Chris, I'm feeling pretty good. My shoulder is actually doing a lot better. And then now you think you're kind of ready to go and hit it. And we're like, well, no, wait a second. You just now got to the point where you've got some available range of motion. We haven't even started thinking about return to sport or return to function and working on higher end of the strength curve, reps to fatigue, and maybe 5 reps to fatigue for some power. How are you doing dynamically? How are you doing with your moving into different planes of motion? I had you just working on some simple planes, but now I want you to, do some things. How are you on the deceleration if you're a thrower? We had a nice young man in here this week who's a pitcher with some rotator cuff issues, getting a lot better. He's been on a return to throwing interval program on his own, again phased out, and now he's ready to try some off-mound throwing. And we were just seeing what he looked like with just a follow-through motion with his balance on his left leg, and because he really hasn't been pitching, he really doesn't have good strength and control on his follow-through leg. So that's really going to affect where his body is, and he eventually could overthrow his shoulder and hurt himself again. So for him, as we're getting into like phase 3, phase 4, I have to make sure that his whole body is functioning correctly for that particular activity. So that's what you need to think about as well. If you are thinking about going back to a sport, it should be progressed slowly, with usually some days off in between. And then you kind of slowly ramp some things up and you kind of slowly get yourself back into that activity. If you're a runner, we kind of use this 10% rule. If you haven't run in many weeks, I might say, hey, depending on what you're used to running, I might say run 5 miles or run 5 minutes, take a break, take a day off, run another 5 minutes, take a day off, run 10 minutes, take a day off, just kind of gradually build you up over a 2-week period of time. or you could look at it miles, add 10% of miles a week or something like that. Too much, too fast, too soon is always a recipe for disaster. I think some of you might know, if you maybe with COVID and things like that, you kind of started to work out or exercise and you kind of went for it and you felt really, really good. And then the next day, like you did a bunch of push-ups and you could hardly raise your arms up, like, oh my God, or I could hardly even get on the commode because my legs were so sore. You kind of overdid it a little bit. Always best to kind of keep things in moderation and take your time. Go at it for a day, rest for a day. If you felt good, you can ramp it up a little bit more, rest another day, ramp it up, rest another day. Rest days are really important. I have a lot of runners that we treat. They come in here with their spreadsheets and all their weekly, monthly journals of everything that they're doing. And I look at it, I'm like, where's your rest day in this stuff? I'm CrossFitting this day. I'm going to HIIT training. I'm running bridges. I do my long run. I do my sprint work, and I'm like, okay, well, where's your rest day and all that? What do you mean? Like a rest day. We build strength and we recover when we rest. So rest days are really, really important. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, and again, if we have any questions coming in, we can, try to answer those as they come. So I got, Morgan kind of checking on that for me a little bit there. But let's just talk a little bit about maybe you hurt your knee. Actually, just start at the bottom. Let's just start with an ankle problem, all right? So you sprain an ankle. You stepped off a curb. You got a little mild swelling. How we grade ankle injuries is basically how much pain and swelling you have and how easy it is to walk. If it is really big and purple, you might want to get an x-ray, number one, for sure, if you can hardly put any weight on it. But what we really found is with ankle injuries and ankle sprains, early weight bearing is important. The weight bearing as tolerated. So if you can, walk on it with a little bit of a limp, maybe one crutch or something like that. Obviously, immediately after injury, we're all about rest, ice, compression, elevation, right? RICE, okay? So, but early weight bearing is important. Early motion is important. So just doing little ankle alphabets, even if it hurts a little bit, okay? You can have a little bit of pain in your ankle. It's gonna be tender. That ligament needs to have a little stimulus to it. You could do some seated heel raises. You could take a little TheraBand and work on some ankle plantar flexion towards like gas pedal type work. Little ankles ins and outs, okay? Little ins and outs, right? But you also could work, your hip and your knee. So you could do straight leg raises. So if I was on the plane here, I could do some straight leg raises. Again, ankle pumps with elevation to get rid of swelling. Some early weight bearing. You could just practice, can you stand on one foot? How's that? Even if it hurts a little bit, working on that balance and dynamic control. And like I was just mentioning, as it feels better, walking, cycling, then you can start ramping the exercises up again. If you're going to go back to a sport and you really need to go back to that sport that might involve a re-injury, obviously some bracing is really great for ankle injuries. And I like an ASO brace, which is a slip-on fabric brace that's got figure 8 straps. There's a stirrup brace that you get a lot of times that like some air pads in it and things. That's okay. Sometimes that's really good if your ankle's really big and swollen. It's a brace that you can kind of put on a little bit better. But once you start thinking about going back to some activities or sports and you're worried about a re-injury, I really like those pull-on, lace-up fabric ones that have these figure 8 straps that you can kind of lock yourself down like we would if you were going to take your ankle. So that's an ankle. Let's say you kind of tweaked your knee somehow, all right? Same kind of thing, if it's a really major injury, I've covered a lot of athletic events over the years. And usually when I'm like on the field or evaluating that, I usually ask the person, how seriously do you think you hurt yourself? Did you hear a pop? Did you feel like it, buckled and gave way? My wife tore her ACL. She knew she did something, but she didn't really think it was all that serious. She just kind of felt like her knee went out on her and buckled. And then I looked at it and I was like, ooh, I don't like the way your knee feels. I think you tore your ACL. And she's like, really? I think I'm okay, And it was an athletic event that we were at. Lo and behold, she had torn her ACL. So sometimes, it's not a really big, huge thing. So that's the first thing. But obviously you have any kind of major, massive amount of swelling and pain, that, again, it goes back to rest, ice, compression, elevation. A knee doesn't really necessarily need to get imaging right away unless you like maybe fell on your kneecap on a hard surface or something like that, and you want to see maybe if you have a kneecap fracture. You don't really need to rush out and get an MRI and that kind of stuff. For a knee injury, you need to kind of see how it goes, and then really go get an examination. An orthopedic surgeon, physical therapist with some sports medicine background really can be able to evaluate your knee in a clinical exam and determine maybe what you might have injured, ACL, PCL, ligaments on the side, meniscus, what have you. But you've injured it, you got some swelling. We're going to control that, like we said in phase 1. Again, some very simple exercises there for the knees, just a basic straight leg raise flexion. Just trying to bring the leg up and down. Any of you know who had some knee surgeries or bad injuries to the knee, this can be a really difficult exercise. The other thing that's really nice is just doing some quad sets where you got something underneath the back of your knee and you're just kind of pushing your knee down into a roll or folded up towel or something like that and tensing the muscle on the top of your thigh, your quadricep. Again, ankle pumps, things on those lines. As it feels a little bit more comfortable, you can kind of sit on the edge of the bed and do some knee extensions, sitting on the edge of the bed, maybe with a little ankle weight. But again, just like I mentioned with the ankle, early weight bearing is kind of really key. A lot of these injuries, just doing some standing knee pumps. I don't know if you can see that really well, but I'll just try and bring that down like that. But just standing, and this is like a standing quad set. I actually really like this exercise as a getaway, and then just kind of weight shifting onto it. How well does it support me? Okay. Talked about the ankle, working on some dynamic balance, depending on pain, but a little bit of pain is not a big deal. Okay. Work through that. Okay. You could do standing hip abduction exercises, standing hip extension exercises. You can even try some standing marches just to get some, again, range of motion and fluid back in there. Then we got, I'll do it this way, some standing heel raises. Okay. So early weight bearing, walking, cycling, things on those lines. Then as things get, a little bit further on down the road, as I was talking about with phases of rehabilitation, as I come back there, then we can start thinking about, adding a little bit of loads into it with either some little baby mini squats, and then eventually maybe off of a little step, a little heel dip exercise. Injury prevention for knee problems, what we find is a lot of times, I was talking about ACLs, and what I might be able to do is stand on my little table here, so you can see a little easier, is that when people squat, sometimes their knees kind of come together like that. This is a little test that we do. Or they go to squat down and they don't really squat really well. They don't have very good squat mechanics. Or they do a single leg squat and it's like, whoa, this knee's all over the place. So if you're doing a bunch of cross training and CrossFit exercises and you do a single leg squat and you don't have good balance and control like that, you're kind of setting yourself up for a little bit of a knee injury. Anytime you were to land on one leg, that knee is going to wobble in and out like that. And it certainly is highly linked to ACL injuries, particularly if your knee's closer to knee extension, which we do find with a lot of female athletes. And there's a lot of research and debate about why female athletes tend to tear their ACLs a little bit more than males. It has to do with anatomy. It's really multifactorial. Okay, a little wider pelvis, a little skinnier notch for the ACL to live in, hips, legs kind of bend toward the knees from the pelvis. But then we also find is that for whatever reason, when females run and jump and land, they tend to land with their knee and closer to extension. Happened to my wife. That's how she tore her ACL. She kind of came down and the knee was close to extension instead of being able to absorb that impact, and her knee went backwards and in and popped. Okay. Well, how do you fix that? How do you work on this control over your knee to help prevent, let's say, meniscus problems or ACL injuries? The other thing you can have with your knee that people come to me, see me for, is called, we just call it anterior knee pain, really fancy medical diagnosis. Or we call it patellofemoral pain syndrome. What does that mean? My kneecap and my thigh hurt and it's a syndrome, right? Sometimes you go to the orthopedic doctor or the family doctor, and they might diagnose you with chondromalacia patella, big fancy word, right? Kind of softening of the cartilage underneath your patella. But that's really all that stuff that goes around to just kind of a general big knee pain type term. If you haven't done any trauma and your knee is bothering you, just with activity. Let's say, again, you've got the COVID-19 going on, and you're starting, I'm going to start running now or something like that. And yeah, my knees are really hurting. It goes back to that single leg squat situation where I can't keep this thing in nice, good alignment. So from an alignment standpoint, what we talk about is a patella tracking problem. Okay, you have the patella sitting on a little groove of your thigh. This is your patella, and it's moving around all over the place. And then if it slides around, that's going to be a little bit of an irritant. It's going to pull on some structures, and it also may irritate the cartilage underneath there, hence the chondromalacia patella. But we also find is if this is your patella and this is your thigh, sometimes it's the thigh, the femur, rolling around underneath the patella. Okay, so you can have patella tracking problems where the patella is moving around. We're going to do some tests and talk about a little bit of flexibility problems, IT band, hip flexors, tight calves, a lot of that stuff can, and weakness can cause, this patella to move around a little bit. But sometimes, and actually a lot of the cases that I see when patients come here, it's actually the femur rolling in and out underneath the patella. Patella is fine. I'll have some, not their fault, but I have patients come to me and they'll say, oh, the doctor says, or someone says, I need to strengthen my VMO, this big, bulky muscle right around my kneecap because my kneecap's not tracking right. And I'll have them make a muscle. I'm like, well, you got a pretty big, powerful VMO there. And then they do their single leg squat and they're like, whoa, well, it's not the VMO that needs to control the patella is the problem. It's the thigh moving underneath the kneecap. And where does that control come from? The hips, right? I'm sure a lot of my patients may be watching this, and everyone knows kind of the clamshell exercise. And I've got a colleague of mine who I'm doing some training with right now, actually, and he hates the clamshell name, but people know what that is. It's really a glute medius re-education exercise. So, okay, all right, Joe, if that's for you. So I'm saying it correctly for you, right? So how do you do a glute medius re-education exercise? So Morgan, let me know how this looks on there. If it's a good view. If not, I can adjust the computer a little bit. Can you see pretty good?
It lags a second. So.
All right, so we'll wait to see how this goes. All right, so I'm opening and closing. Now the key on this exercise really is how my hips are stacked. So I need to adjust this a little bit so we can see a little bit. I apologize wearing black today, but we'll see how this goes. But what I tell my patients is you have your hip bone on the table and then your ribs and things like that. Well, there should be a little space between your hip bone and your ribs. So if there's not a space underneath there, your hips aren't really stacked on top of each other. So I like to just kind of either take your top hand and hold that pelvis away from your top shoulder so that, like, you can see my belt now is going straight down toward the table. And then I'm going to open. And now the key on this one really is how slowly, particularly this last little bit, see that little space there? Does it just fall? Or can I actually slowly close that space and then maybe barely touch my other knee? Remember I was talking about the squatting when our legs are rolling in? So here's that thigh rolling in underneath our kneecap. And can I control that little bit? And I can tell you, if I just go like this, oh, I did 100 clams. Well, good for you. Okay, this is not the control that you need. This is the control you need when you're doing a single leg squat. We got to control that thigh from rolling in towards the other leg. So that last 4 inches is really, really, really important to work through. And this is a big burning exercise. This is a good phase 1, phase 2 exercise. So we're talking 25 to 30 reps to fatigue. A lot of my patients get tired around 10 or 12. I'm actually starting to feel a little burn right back in here, which is where I want that. All right, glute med re-education exercise, clamshells. Key point, stacked up on top of each other, have a little hollow underneath here, or maybe even block yourself like that. And then really working that last 2, 3, 4, just whip through these things like that. Okay, that's not going to do much good for you. Then in the same position, we have sideline hip abduction. Sideline hip abduct away, right? We take something away. So it's a side lying leg lift, if you want to think about it along those lines. Same principle. If we're not in a very good position with not much of a space underneath here or rolled around or we're not stacked up real well, a common way people do this is they actually do a straight leg raise, which we already showed you. That's not a side lying hip abduction or a side lying lift. It needs to be straight up and maybe even a little bit of an external rotation, actually. Okay. Same thing. This one, you really have got to stabilize your pelvis on, because the tendency here is when this muscle is weak, we use our low back to do it. We do that. I don't know if you can see that, but I am picking my leg up by bending my trunk. And even if you have some low back pain, there's a big possibility that your quadratus lumborum is trying to be a hip abductor for you. Okay, so we're going to block the quadratus lumborum from doing that. I don't need any help. Oh my goodness, that's a lot harder if I do it like that. You can see now there's no trunk movement whatsoever. Okay, that's cheating. That's my trunk lifting my leg up. That's my hip. And I tell you, if you do that for any of you, most likely you're going to be burning in about 4 or 5 reps. A lot of people can't even hold that leg up with resistance. Okay, it's really common to have a weak muscle there. And in standing, what happens is when this hip abduction is weak, we end up dropping down. So in the camera, this is looking backwards, but that's all right. So again, let's just say the camera's backwards, so it's hard for me to do this thing. All right, but when our hips drop like that, our knee goes in. Okay, big main thing to strengthen those hips up. The other thing I like to do too is for the hip strengthening, this is a little test that we do for our runners. Our arms are up like this. Okay, can you do a bridge? And can you extend a leg and hold it 10 seconds? Can I do it? I think I can. Without cramping of your hamstrings. And then can I do the other one? Without cramping of my hamstrings. And I can. I'm a little shaky. I need to practice that one. If you can't do that, or you try to do that and your hamstrings just instantly cramp, well, then you have another glute muscle that's weak on you, and that's our glute max. We just talked about the glute medius, really important, kind of controlling what we call transverse plane motion or rotational problems with our thigh rolling in and giving ourselves some knee pain, potentially even leading to some ACL injuries if you tend to be closer to knee extension when you land. Hip abduction exercises where things are going kind of going side to side. Again, not controlling our thigh bone. If our glutes maxes are weak, that's also a problem for squatting and other things like that. Again, a lot of pressure into our knees. So here's a glute max re-education. I just showed you glute med re-education. I'm gonna do it. Let's get out this way. All right. So here we go. I'm on my belly. Morgan, would you get me a pillow, please? So she's gonna bring me a pillow because a lot of people being on their stomachs like this can really irritate their low back. So I'm just gonna show you if you're doing any kind of stomach exercises, it's best to have a pillow. All right. And maybe even 2 for some of you. Okay. If you can't lie on your stomach, there's other ways to do this. So obviously, you're pregnant or something like that, or it's just really too uncomfortable to lie on your stomach. All right, this is a little difficult to see. I apologize, y'all. Can you turn the computer just a smidge so it's for me? That's good. All right, so you can't really see, but I'm going to just talk you through this. So here I am on my stomach, and I want to get this glute to work a little bit better and not so much hamstring activity. My toes are on the table, my knees are down. All right. I'm going to engage my abdominals and my rear end a little bit. So there's a little bit of a glute squeeze. And the idea is I want to think about floating the back of my knee toward the ceiling. Floating the back of the knee toward my ceiling. Okay? You're going to use your quad a little bit. But the idea is, can I really use my glute to lift my leg up? Okay. And then maybe hold for a couple of seconds. And back down. We do this exercise a lot, particularly of our patients who get the cramping with the bridge exercise. Once that, you can do 25, 30 repetitions of that. Then you can try to do just barely with a little point and then back. Squeeze the butt, straighten the knee, lift, point, back, and down. Good little open chain glute max re-education exercise. Okay? And then maybe a little child pose stretch after that if you've been on your stomach too long and it becomes uncomfortable. All right. So those are some really nice injury prevention and also early phase rehab strategies where we're targeting the hips to help us in knee pain. The other thing that happens a lot of times when our knees are bothering us or we're having knee pain, particularly with squatting and things on those lines, is tight calves. And I'm taking a quick drink of water. I apologize for the plastic bottle out there, y'all. Try not to do that, but it is what it is today. Okay, so tight calves, again, cause issues at our knee. How does that happen? All right. If I go to squat, okay, and I don't have good ankle range of motion, well then it's going to cause me to have to compensate somewhere up the chain. So calf flexibility is extremely, extremely, extremely important, almost for all type weight bearing, running, just daily activities. We need calf flexibility. If we're sitting at a desk all day long, calves get tight. So how do you stretch your calves? The right way. All right, I'll move this back a little bit so you can see a little easier maybe. Hopefully this will work. I'm gonna lean forward and this back leg, I'm actually picking my big toe up in the air a little bit. I've seen many people do these little calf stretches where they're like leaning way over and their foot splayed out, all kinds of stuff. No. Lean forward, pick the big toe up, 20, 30 seconds or so till you feel a nice stretch in the calf. If you pick your big toe up, you should feel a stretch almost instantaneously. You want to know why the big toe is important? You can email me and I'll tell you. It's called a windlass mechanism and it gets kind of complicated, but just trust me, big toe up, you'll feel a much better stretch in your calf. You also could bend your knee a little bit and get the lower calf muscle.
Scoot back a little. The logo's in the way.
How about that? All right, so maybe one with the knee bent, all right? That's knee straight, big toe up, knee bent, okay? Stretch your calves, okay? There's things out there called the pro stretch and some other things like that. Really important. Can't emphasize calf flexibility enough for lower leg injury prevention, aches and pains of the knees, squat problems, all that kind of stuff. Knee calf flexibility, runners, all those, okay? Really, really important. All right, that's the lower leg for the most part. For return to sport, we talked about, just to recap, thinking about an injury. Sometimes, you are injured or you could be hurt. So seeking a professional to help differentiate that out. What's the state of this injury? Where are you in the phases of rehabilitation? Is this going to be short term or just a major injury that we're going to have to really take our time to let it heal? And then what are the strategies that we would use as we would progress you through the healing phases? And then strategies maybe to prevent the injury from occurring again in the future. All right, and we talked a little bit about what you might be able to do right now just to prevent maybe your knees bothering you and things like squatting. Okay, we got maybe 15 more minutes or so here. So the back's a whole nother thing, right? And Dr. Pacholka's done some things on the back and stuff like that. So I don't know how much I want to spend some time on talking about back injuries because they're very unique. Lots of different structures can give us symptoms, sciatica, low back pain, things like that. I will tell you that sitting is the #1 compressive force to the low back. That's what's going to bother you. Discs don't like sitting. If you have a lot of pain and stiffness in the morning, that means you're having a little bit of a little disc irritation. It's totally normal. I think Dr. Pacholka's done some nice things on the MRIs and all that stuff and imaging of the low back. Everybody's got herniated discs for the most part, particularly when we get into our middle ages, okay? It's not unusual. It's just whether they're symptomatic or not and whether they're really the source of your symptoms. Piriformis syndrome, sciatica, all those different things. I will tell you that, that bridge exercise and some of the things I've already shown you, the hip abduction exercise, we're not using your QL, and then try not to sit quite so much, which is just a big compressive force to our spine. Walking, bike riding, things on those lines. Again, Back injuries, we used to put people on bed rest for like 2 weeks. And we don't do that anymore. It's early movement, early weight bearing within pain-free ranges, and then trying to work yourself through, and then maybe getting some professional help through a trained physical therapist or another medical professional that really has some expertise in that area that's going to work with you on manual therapy and corrective exercises. That's really the key for any of these problems, okay? All right, shoulders. I see a lot of people with shoulder problems. It's just, when I came out of school, it wasn't an area that I felt really strong in rehabilitating. And so I got with some experts in the field and industry and sports medicine and really understanding how to examine a shoulder, number one, so I could figure out exactly what was the cause of their symptoms. And then once I knew the cause and what structure it was, then it was a little easier to design a specific exercise program for them. I used to just do all the same exercises for every shoulder problem that came through the door, no matter what my exam was, because I wasn't very good on the exam. And then some got better, and then some actually got worse. Okay, so when our shoulders start to hurt without trauma, so if you fall on an arm, we call that a foosh, F-O-O-S-H, or a fusa, right? Fall on outstretched arm or hand, okay? So I fall, I jam my shoulder. You have the collarbone coming in, so you can have an AC separation, like you've seen a couple football players. I think this already started the season. So that's where the collarbone comes in the shoulder. That usually hurts when we kind of reach across. It's very, very specific. Okay. Then you have the labrum, which is the little lip that goes around the socket where our arm bone goes into, and we can jam or injure that labrum. And then the rotator cuff lives in there too, so you can jam and bruise the rotator cuff. And we got little bursts of sacs and all kinds of things. So obviously trauma on a fall and outstretched arm, really does need to be evaluated. You're gonna be kind of hurt. And it does take a little bit longer rehabilitation to get through. And hopefully it's something you could avoid surgery for, but sometimes that does ultimately require surgery to fix if, conservative therapy doesn't work. And then we go down the line with some imaging like an arthrogram is what I really recommend for the shoulder. That's where they inject dye into there versus a standard MRI. But an orthopedic surgeon or orthopedic physician or even a trained physical therapist like myself will help guide you with those decision making for imaging of the shoulder. All right, AC separations, things like that, fall and an outstretched arm. But our shoulders just started hurting. I don't even know why. It's just kind of bothered me. Maybe it was a lot of weekend warrior activities, planting, gardening, reaching overhead, painting, whatever it might be. There's a lot of stuff. So what happens there? Well, what usually happens, back to poor posture, is I'm sitting working on the computer and I'm all like this, or I'm on my phone like this. And then I just kind of live in this position, this posture position, where I'm just like this. And what happens when we try to raise our arms up when we're kind of slumpy? They don't go up really high. You can try that for yourself. Like sit up really straight. Oh, that's easy. Now really slump down and oh, wow. They don't go up near as high. Well, of course not, because the shoulder blade now is rounded up over the top. And when you go to lift, you're going to bang against the roof of your shoulder, which is the shoulder blade coming around. Underneath that roof is where all your rotator cuff stuff is and the versa. So you're going to be banging, 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 banging. If you try to do a bunch of overhead activities or a bunch of repetitive motion activities, you're just going to be rubbing the rotator cuff underneath the roof of your shoulder, underneath that scapula, and it's going to become irritated. And you keep doing it often enough, and then if you add a fall into there, you're going to have a little partial rotator cuff tear or full thickness rotator cuff tear. So posture. How many times have we talked about this? I think I've already done a couple of videos about posture. I know we did a whole working from home video series on workstation ergonomics and things on those lines to help you with keeping yourself out of this rounded shoulder, forward head posture. So arm openings, little thoracic extension, sitting in a chair, really working on thinking about opening all this up so that we've got nice space for our shoulders to work in. If reaching across our body is kind of painful, this is a Hawkins-Kennedy test for impingement, all the way up and hurts at the end. Those kind of tests. This is a near impingement test. Those are impingements. That's where the ball is banging against something and you've got some irritation going on there. It could have been where you developed some spurs or something underneath the roof of your shoulder, and that would show up on an x-ray, what have you. So Someone's calling me, so I wasn't sure what we're going there. All right, so let's talk about impingement. Posture, 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 and then some rotator cuff strengthening, which I'm going to show you. If you've got pain kind of in the middle, like I'm fine, and then, oh, that kind of hurts, and then I can clear. Oh, that kind of hurts, and then I can clear. That's a little bit more of a rotator cuff problem, maybe with a little bit of bursitis. Like when we go to lift our arm up, our rotator cuff is supposed to kick in and kind of clear that ball out from underneath the roof and give us a good function. So if you don't have this, if you have this painful arc, or you stick your arm out and you just really can't hold it up in the air, we call it a drop arm test, or pain to lift off the back, pain to push into there, okay? All those are some potentially injuries or tears, and you really need to go see a therapist, a physical therapist for that, I think, because we're going to be conservative to be able to rehab that for you. So we got impingements, things banging in, and then we got this kind of painful arc. Sleeping at night, where it hurts to lie on that shoulder, waking up at night, all those things are really indicative of some sort of rotator cuff pathology. And I highly recommend you guys get some consultations for that, and then learn a good exercise program that's specific for you. And it also should involve some sort of manual therapy, either to your thoracic spine or working on that. If you're a throwing athlete, this is a little bit different. So we have this primary impingement where like things are banging into each other because there's not enough space, not enough room. Maybe the rotator cuff's not working right. Maybe you got a small tear. Maybe something that's going on a long period of time with some arthritis, what have you. If you're a throwing athlete and you're getting pain, particularly at this like cocking phase back in here, and it's really on the back of your shoulder, which is kind of a weird place, it can refer down to the front, or maybe even on some follow through. What we have in throwing athletes a lot of time is we call a secondary impingement. Primary impingement, banging against things, not enough room, painful arc. Secondary impingement is where we've got an instability within the ball and socket of the shoulder joint. Okay, I'll bring this a little first like that. You can see it. Secondary impingement, micro instability, balls rolling around inside the socket. Go back to throw a cock, oh, that really hurts. Well, what's happening is we've lost some stability for the ball to stay centered within the socket, and then it kind of rolls and pinches on the structures as we kind of roll back. And put some pressure on the labrum, some other things in those lines. So again, that we're going to show you some external rotation strengthening exercises, strengthening the rotator cuff, particularly the external rotators and the internal rotators are going to help keep that ball in that socket. Now, if you come to therapy, we're going to start you with down here by the side until you can do about 25 or 30 reps. And then eventually I'm going to bring it away from your body and then up a little bit. So here's a little, and you don't need a really strong band for this. This is yellow. This is pretty easy. So you can see where I'm just kind of holding this and I'm working on good posture and I'm just opening and closing. Now I like it to go slack in between in the beginning because this is kind of hard. TheraBand is really handy and helpful, or elastic tubing or elastic banding. The problem with elastic resistance is that the further you pull away, the more resistance it has. So it's actually kind of hard. So sometimes I'll break this up into ranges, or I'll do little half ranges. So I'll go belly to here, belly to here, belly to here, 25. And then I'll go here to out, here to out, here to out. Because doing this one, particularly if you have a painful shoulder, is not an easy exercise to do. Break it in half. Boom, 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 boom. Then eventually taking it where you're going away from your side of your body, and then eventually into more of a throwing thing, and then really working on that eccentric control again, just like we were showing with the clam exercise, the glute med re-education exercise. Sometimes in throwing athletes, we have what we call an internal rotation deficit. And that's where if you're a throwing athlete and you're having shoulder pain, you really need to get evaluated. Because if you've developed a rotator cuff internal rotation deficit where our arc of motion is off from external to internal by about 10 or 15 degrees or more, you've lost some mobility within the rotator cuff mechanism and musculature, and that's a problem. And usually that can be addressed. It's normal for a throwing athlete to have a lot of external rotation compared to their non-throwing arm, but when we go forward, they should kind of balance out a little bit. If they don't, like this one's up here somewhere, then there's an internal rotation deficit that needs to get addressed and needs to get fixed. And that's usually corrected with some manual therapy and some stretching. So that's shoulder issues. Posture, okay? Thinking about impingement issues and then working on ways to strengthen your rotator cuff. You also can do internal, which is a little harder to do by yourself, but internal is also equally important to work on. Then we have our shoulder blade muscles. One exercise I like to do with this TheraBand is pretend like you're holding a beach ball and just thinking about standing up, and I'm just going to pinch my shoulder blades together from different positions, like around the clock, like 3 and 9, 10 and 2, whatever that might be, 4 and 10, however this works, right? You get the idea. Can I pinch my shoulder blades together from different positions? We also have what's called prone Ys and Ts and Is. So I'm laying down. I'm going to make a Y up toward my ear, a T out to the side, and an I straight back. Y is the most difficult. That's our lower trap. Straight out to the side and straight back. Ys, Ts, and Is. Thinking about the shoulder blade, again, slow return. You're not just going to swing this. Ys, Ts, and Is for shoulder blade. The other thing you can do too, which is kind of nice, I'm going to come over to this wall. Or just doing a Y and standing sometimes. Oh, lower trap lift off. Will you give me that physio ball? Just pinching our shoulder blades together by doing a standing Y exercise. I did show you with that TheraBand. Here's with a ball. You can add a little weight. And just take that ball off the wall. I'm not going to lean back. Again, this is why doing videos is difficult, because we have people who know what they're supposed to be doing in our clinic, and we'll look away, and then we'll look back, and then sure enough, they're doing them wrong, even though they've been told how many times to do it correctly. Posture, posture, posture for the shoulder. Of course, we've got neck and headaches, and neck whiplash injuries, and neck injuries. Neck and low back, you really need to come in. You have neck and low back pain, you really need to get evaluated. Come in, let us take a look at it, and see how it's all coming along. All right. That's kind of what I got for you today. I hope you found a benefit of that. Injury prevention strategies, depending on the state of your injury. If it's a foot or an ankle and it's a lot of swelling and bruising, always get an X-ray. Okay. Very easily you can have a fracture and not know it. It's really important to know that. But it's rest, ice, compression, elevation, and ankle pumps, ankle alphabet, a lot of high rep motions in a pain-free range, early weight bearing, start to try to walk normal, talked about some bracing, and then there's strengthening exercises with ankles and standing balance. Then we talked about our knees, talked about the importance of having good limb control of what happens when we do a single leg squat or a knee, a deep squat. Do our knees go in or out? Do we have good control over our limb? If we don't, it could be tight calf, and most likely it's the weak hip. So we talked about, the clam exercise, the hip abduction exercise, and how to do those nice and slowly without compensations. Talked about the bridge exercise, again, glute max strength without hamstring overpowering. That's, again, where we see a lot of chronic hamstring injuries with patients. Glutes aren't working, hamstrings are doing the job that the glutes were designed to do. And then we transitioned up to a little bit about the shoulder, impingement, rotator cuff, posture, shoulder blade strengthening from different positions, and the really value of rotator cuff strengthening. And I can't just encourage you guys enough. If you're having problems that just aren't going away within a week or two, you really need to get, let's not delay this in getting help, because it's much more difficult when you come in. I get this all the time, even patients who know me, who I've fixed in the past. They are always so apologetic when they come in. You're like, I don't know why it took me so long to come see you. I should have gone. I know, it's okay. Life's busy and we procrastinate and we think it's going to go away. It's been 2 weeks and it's not getting any better. You need to see a medical professional for something like that. It could be something simple. I'm like, hey, this is what we got to do. You're going to rest this. You're going to take a break with this. You're going to do these exercises. I'm going to do some manual therapy. We're going to be fine. Just give us some time. Or it could be like, ooh, you really are hurt. let's really think about what we need to do as far as putting you in a phase of rehabilitation. All right, I hope you like this. Share this. Happy Friday, everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks again.